just wanted to give the backstory of kind of how everything started and how I ended up getting the information that I needed and getting the appointment that I needed with the specialist that I saw. So my symptoms first began in 2003. 3 years prior, I was actually in a major car accident, which I had a whiplash injury and a head injury. I went to physical therapy after. When the accident first happened, I was knocked out. I was cut from here all the way down to the end of my nose. So I hit my head really hard. This side of my head is still numb from that impact. So I hit my head on the dash. I was actually in the front passenger seat. And the residuals from that did not show up until actually 3 years after that accident. So I went to physical therapy a little bit after the accident, but I was young at the time and I didn't really continue physical therapy like I probably should have. But we were singing, traveling, and, just going about life. So I really wasn't taking care of my neck or taking it seriously that I had an injury, and I didn't really know, I guess, what could happen from it, what the residuals would be like from it. So 3 years later, 2003, I actually got a bladder infection. This was shortly after I got married, and then I got a upper respiratory infection. I ended up having a bad cough, and I just thought that I had gotten sick, even though I was very rarely sick. I just thought, okay, well, I just have this cough, so I got some over-the-counter medicine. Me and my husband went home. I laid down. I took the medicine. But when I got up, it was like something triggered something, and my life was like never the same after that. So I ended up developing all kinds of weird neurological symptoms. I was rushed to the hospital. They told me I probably just had an allergic reaction to the over-the-counter medicine I took. They sent me home, but I did not get better. I started to spiral downward and get progressively worse. They ended up diagnosing me with bronchitis. They gave me antibiotics to take. After the antibiotics, the course of antibiotics that they gave me, I did not improve. So I started having increased fatigue. I was very fatigued. I could not stand up or sit up for long periods of time without my heart racing. So I was having all the symptoms of POTS and dysautonomia. I was having trouble walking. I was having trouble breathing. I was getting short of breath. I was actually experiencing crashes. So I would do very little activity, but then my body would just shut down from doing very little activity, and I would not be able to do anything for like weeks at a time. I was actually having really bad tremors. I started to develop tremors and seizure-like episodes, which they did EEGs, EKGs, brain scans, everything. Everything kept coming back normal or within normal range. They tested me for every type of disease, every type of neurological disease. I went back and forth from like seeing neurologists, regular doctors, rheumatologists, chiropractors. My friend, Dr. Johnny Brown, was actually the first chiropractor that I went to, and they actually x-rayed my neck and was like, you have some issues going on here with your neck. They started adjusting my atlas, which is the first vertebrae. And when they would adjust my atlas, I would actually feel better. My symptoms would relieve. But before I would even leave the office, the adjustment would not hold. So I would go back to feeling like I did. So he referred me to other chiropractors. I saw a chiropractic neurologist. I saw chiropractors that did the NUCA method. I also tried regular herbal remedies, just holistic natural things as well. But nothing was really relieving the symptoms or how I felt. So doctors were just kind of baffled by my condition for years. No one was able to help me. I was just continuing to kind of spiral downward, and I was kind of just sent home by every doctor to just suffer. Like nobody knew what to do for me or how to handle what was going on with me. At the time, I didn't realize that I was young, so I didn't realize like having to really advocate for myself and speak up for myself, because doctors just kept telling me that all of this was just in my head, that I had suffered from some type of emotional trauma when I was younger, and this was just how my body was coping with it. I had doctors just tell me I needed to see a psychologist or get some type of cognitive therapy. Some doctors just were like, well, maybe you should just try physical therapy. But I was just having such a hard time dealing with the reality that I was just going to be this way and nobody was going to be able to figure out, nobody was going to help me. So for years, I struggled with going back and forth to the doctors, dealing with insurance changes, insurance denials, just trying to get to the bottom of everything that was going on. I started having just a ton of new symptoms like ringing in the ear. I started developing this really bad headache in the back of my head that just would not go away. It was just there every day, all the time. I started having a more difficult time turning my neck and actually using my neck. And I started to notice that whenever I did use my neck, the symptoms that I had were worse. Almost every time that I turned my neck, it would make my symptoms worse. So I just kept trying to find what the answer was. I ended up getting an MRI on my neck finally, like in 2013, I believe. They did another MRI on my neck and they told me everything looked normal. So nobody was alarmed, but I was still having all the same symptoms. So I figured that I probably had chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, because I was having a lot of just nerve pain. I was always in pain. I was always tired. I had unrefreshed sleep. When I would go to sleep, I never felt like I rested. I never would feel well rested. I was having light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. There was just a lot of things that were going wrong. So I just tried to do the best that I could to make my life work, because in the midst of all of this, I was still trying to work, jobs. I was still having kids. So all the medications and things that they were trying to give me, I really didn't want to take them because I didn't like feeling out of it, especially because a lot of the time I was the only one here with my kids. I'm the primary caretaker, so I never wanted to feel not here. I always wanted to be alert, just in case anything happened. But it was very, very hard to be chronically ill as a mother and to be taking care of your kids, to be suffering. And, at the time, I just really didn't have anybody that I could talk to or that identified with me. So it was a really, really hard time in my life. I went through a lot of different phases. of how I felt. I was angry, I was sad, I was depressed, I was suicidal at one point because I was like, God, why would you allow my health to be challenged in this way? Because I really did not feel that God could use me in any capacity with the way that I was. But God proved me wrong a lot because I was asked to do, or my life allowed me to do some pretty amazing things. And God was always there to strengthen me and to help me. But it was hard not being able to really explain what was going on with me health-wise because I was not properly diagnosed. So I didn't, even though I knew that this was probably what I had, like chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, I didn't get formally diagnosed with it until 2016, which was like 13 years after the symptoms started. And I think the reason why it took so long was because in the meantime of all of this going on, I was having kids. So there were times that I was not going to the doctor and pursuing my own health because I was just focusing on being a mother and just trying to handle everything. And there were times where honestly we just ran out of money. I couldn't afford to go to doctors and get any more tests done or any scans because all of these things are also very expensive, even with health insurance. And also I got tired of being in the same circle because we always had HMO plans that didn't allow me to see certain specialists. And honestly, I was clueless about who to even see to help myself. So I went to this really nice rheumatologist and he tested me for more things. And he is the one that actually diagnosed me with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. So getting that diagnosis kind of confirmed to me what I pretty much already knew, but I didn't feel that it was the end. I didn't feel like it was the, this is it. This is where this is, because I was having so many neurological issues. I just didn't feel like, I felt like the chronic fatigue syndrome and the fibromyalgia and the movement disorder and every other thing that I was having was a symptom of a bigger issue, but I just needed to find it. So I actually saw the documentary Unrest that Jen Bria did. My sister told me to watch it, so I did. I watched it. I was like, wow, this is like my life, and so I kind of followed Jen Bria's story, but didn't really keep up with it. But in 2019, I started following her story again just to see like where she was and how she was doing and to see if there was any new information about ME/CFS. If you have CFS, it has different names, but it's called myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. And so I just was trying to find out, more information about it and different things like that. So I looked her up again, I think in 2019, and I saw one of her videos and somebody put under her video that she had made a full recovery. She had CCI. So at this time in my life, I had pretty much tried everything, dietary changes, things like that. And there were times that my symptoms did improve, but then they would all come crashing back again. So I was like, what did she do to like get rid of everything that she had? And I read that she had CCI. So I was like, what in the world is CCI? So I just started looking up CCI and really researching it and trying to find out as much as I could about it. So I found out that it was cranial cervical instability. And what that means is just basically that there's something wrong in the junction where your skull meets your vertebrae. So I was like, okay. So I started reading about just instability in that area, period, like having atlantoaxial instability where your top two vertebrae are not functioning properly. And I read about what that can cause. I read about the symptoms that it produces, and all of the symptoms were symptoms that I actually had been experiencing for all of these years. So I got really excited because I was like, oh my God, like I feel like I'm on the right path, like I'm onto something here. So I started reading about those who are at risk for getting CCI and AAI, mostly people with connective tissue disorders, which I knew I didn't have, but it also said if you experience trauma, either from sports accident or motor vehicle accident, if you've had a whiplash injury, and I was like, aha, that's where it is, because that's what happened to me. I just never pursued fully understanding or finding out what was going on with my neck. I just started thinking back on all the doctor's appointments I had. Everything that I was telling doctors was lining up with this. My story never changed. Every time I went in a doctor's office, I told the same story. I gave them the same list of symptoms, but everybody never put it all together because it's a tricky diagnosis to make, and very few doctors really understand it, and very few doctors understand how to treat it. So I knew that I had to get to a specialist that understood it and treated it a lot. Jen Bria wrote about her surgery and her recovery from CCI on Medium. So I actually read her story, and I actually emailed the same neurosurgeon that she saw for CCI, and I got in touch with him. I was actually surprised, but he emailed me back and told me to follow the instructions on his website, which I did. I followed his instructions. I did the pre-testing. He has you do like some pre-testing at home with doing cervical traction, which is where they pull your head up off of your vertebrae. I did that. I got the testing that I was supposed to get, the scans I was supposed to get, and I sent everything to New York just in hopes that he would accept my case. He accepted my case, and I had the appointment with him in October of 2020. And from there, I scheduled a visit to New York so that I could get the testing to prove his theory. He suspected, of course, that I had CCI, and he also suspected that I had Chiari malformation. Now, because I didn't have an extreme case, he told me the Chiari was kind of obvious just based on how my cerebellum looked. And Chiari malformation is basically when the back of your head may be misshapen and it causes your cerebellum to lower into your spinal canal, and that can cause brainstem compression. CCI also causes brainstem compression depending on the type that you have. There are like 3 types of CCI that you can have. If you're unstable in your top 2 vertebrae, or if you have cranial settling where your skull is sitting too low, it could cause compression on the nerves and blood vessels, arteries. All of that part of your neck is a very crucial part because that's where your brain meets your spine. It contains your brain stem. It contains everything important. Your brain is sending signals down to your body, and the signals and the wires are getting all crossed because as you're rotating or moving your neck, the area where your brainstem is getting compressed and smushed. The arteries are getting pinched. So your body is in a chaotic state, basically. And that's what had been happening to me. this whole time. So it wasn't that my body was actually sick. It was the mechanics of my neck that was messing everything up because things are out of place. I was experiencing compression on my brainstem and the blood vessels and arteries and nerves in that area. And that is what was causing all of the symptoms. So he wanted me to come to New York to get further testing to prove his theory of both things. So I actually scheduled time in December to go to New York and have all the testing done. And if his theory is confirmed and if he finds what he needs to find, I will actually be told if I'm a candidate for surgery or not. So basically they have to take measurements and do further testing, further scans to basically see if you're a candidate for surgery. If you're not, he tells you what he recommends that you do. And if you are, he still is going to give you advice on the best treatment plan and the best options for you. So there's so much in this story. I could not fit it all in one video, but that's basically the backstory of how I ended up going to New York and meeting Dr. B and doing all the things that I'm doing now. Of course, there's so much that I could say about the past 17 years because there's obviously a lot that happened in that time, but the gist is I've been a medical mystery for the past 17 years. Like nobody has been able to figure it out. And I asked my neurosurgeon, like, why did so many people miss this? That was my main question, because going to doctors and them not understanding and them telling you, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, it wears on you mentally and physically, and it can actually cause so much mental harm when doctors are basically telling you, well, we can't figure it out, we can't find it, so it must be you're producing these symptoms. It's almost like they're blaming you for being sick, and you're like, I don't have any control over this. You're already dealing with a lot of mental pressure from just your everyday life and not being able to function the way that you want to. And losing your health is a hard thing to go through mentally. And then to have doctors on top of that, like just totally not understand and not be compassionate and not, because the truth is, after you leave the doctor's office, they're not really researching your case. You very rarely find doctors that are actually looking for answers when you're not in their presence. So I'm just glad that I found a doctor that actually took time to look at all of my symptoms and put all of the pieces together. And when I had my consultation with Dr. B, it was like, I just knew that I knew. I was like, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. And the fact that I didn't have all of the measurements, because they do use scientific measurements to measure your scans and different things like that. And according to my scans, I was within normal range. I did not fit an extensive criteria for the problem that I was having, but I was having massive symptoms, and he paid attention to everything that I said and everything. So I'm just excited that he listened. And I know that it was the Lord. So I thank him. I thank him for giving me favor with this doctor and for allowing him to look at me as a whole patient and not just look at the scans and say, well, I don't see it, or it's within normal range. So, I can't help you. So I'm excited. So I will show you guys how my trip was in New York in the next couple of diary entry videos, because I actually filmed as much as I could when I went to New York. There were a lot of things that I couldn't film, but I tried to film as much as I could. So I just want to encourage anyone out there who may be dealing with chronic illness or dealing with any issues, just don't give up. Don't give up. I know how discouraging and how deflating it can be when people don't understand you, when doctors don't understand you, when your friends, when your relatives don't understand you. You can feel very isolated and alone, but I just want you to know that you are not alone. You're not alone, and I want you to be encouraged. Keep your head up. Don't stop fighting, and don't stop advocating for yourself, because you know your body. Like, you know when something doesn't feel right. You know when something isn't right. And I had just been telling people for years, it was hard for me to explain what I was going through, but I was telling them, like, something is not right. So don't stop advocating for yourself. Don't stop pushing for people to listen to you, so you can get down to the answers that you need to get down to. That's my advice.